To lose loved ones before their time.
It might be 2 weeks' time, it might be 4 months' time, it might be 12 months' time, who knows?
How on earth did it come to this?
The coronavirus pandemic started in China, spread to Europe and had reached the UK by the end of January.
But we now have a new variant of the virus, and it's been both frustrating and alarming to see the speed with which the new variant is spreading.
So health is something that affects how we think, it affects how we feel, it affects how we act, it affects choices we make, the relationships we have, our day-to-day experiences, and it's something that I think is really related to our emotional well-being, our psychological well-being, our social well-being, and there's many things that can impact on our mental health.
Everybody has mental health. For some, it's more positive, and for some, it's not so good. And I think we've all got to try and look after our own mental health and do what we find works towards positive mental health.
I do know people personally with mental health issues, and it's something that's become increasingly worse and definitely needs to be improved on the help surrounding mental health.
Mental health has got increasingly worse, especially during lockdown, as we're not able to go out and do many things and we're mostly stuck inside without seeing any friends or family. It is claimed that suicide rates are up 200% since lockdown. However, we do not know if this is true or not, as there's no current evidence to show the percentage or number of suicide rates on the rise. However, we do know that many people are struggling with their mental health due to lockdown, and hotlines like the Good Samaritans are overrun by calls every single day.
We now have a new variant of the virus, and it's been both frustrating and alarming to see the speed with which the new variant is spreading. Our scientists have confirmed this new variant is between 50 and 70% more transmissible.
Do you think lockdown has affected mental health?
Yes, I think lockdown's had a really big impact on mental health, especially with the mental health young people. I think research is just starting to show the impact it's had, and there's some indications that where 1 in 10 might have experienced mental health difficulties before, it's now 1 in 6.
I don't know, it's weird because I think it has had, a high percentage of people would say it's had a negative impact on their mental health, because they haven't had the freedom to do the things they would normally do. They haven't been able to see people they normally want to see. But then for some people, it's had a positive impact in that I think especially children that we work with, you know, some of them actually like being at home.
Being stuck in lockdown means we've got a lot of time on our hands, and with all this spare time, a lot of people have looked into more social media, and social media has become increasingly more popular, and it's just something to do in everyone's spare time. However, studies have also found that social media greatly impacts mental health, and with everyone stuck inside at the moment and on their phones, this really isn't a good mix. Social media has been proven to be addictive and to be able to take over our lives unconsciously. And with younger generations and the rise in technology, this is creating a younger generation full of mental health issues. People look to be validated by others on social media. This can be done through liking and commenting, and this gives us a rush of serotonin knowing that other people are liking our content, and this is how social media can be addictive. Meaning that people are more addicted to go on their phones and to stay on social media for longer instead of getting out and doing stuff to actually help their mental health. Another way that social media impacts mental health is because of social media influencers who post content that's unrealistic, and they post unrealistic lives which we then compare ourselves to. lives that seem almost unachievable and make our lives seem really boring.
Okay. Do you think social media impacts mental health?
I think social media affects mental health, especially as a younger person, you can look at different influences like body image and want to look like them and not accept your own body and your own self.
Yes and no. I think for me the answer is how we use social media, whether we use it positively and what it exposes us to in terms of risks. So I think that social media can be positive if it's used in a positive way.
Massively. I think on social media you have a lot of people who are both famous and not famous, or just Joe Public, who portray their lives to be really perfect and rosy and positive, and sometimes people only tell you the good sides of their lives. And then I think if you're a person looking in, reading that, you then sometimes might compare your own life to people that have got these apparently rosy lives that are just, you know, the best. So that social media, a lot of people are keyboard warriors, so they find it a lot easier to say things on social media they wouldn't normally say to other people, and that can have a negative impact.
Photo editing has existed for a long time in traditional media, but in recent years it's become much more widely and easily accessible. Now with a few clicks of your phone you can download an app and alter your appearance, sometimes beyond recognition. Not only is this behaviour harmful to the person editing their own photo, but it's also harmful to the person consuming the image. It creates an unrealistic and unattainable beauty ideal that is fueling a feeling of inadequacy for entire generations. This often leading to depression and unhealthy eating habits and eating disorders.
Do you agree that more people are on social media than ever before because they're stuck inside?
Quite a difficult question. I think a lot of people use social media as a way of connecting with other people, and I think because of the lockdown situation it's an important way that relationships are sustained, especially in a county like Cornwall, which is geographically quite isolated, and transportation difficulties, peer groups might not be from the same area, and social media can play a really important role in doing that. But depending on how social media is used, it's also with an awareness kind of that it has its own pressures in terms of how people self-define. And we know, for example, when you click on a like, it can release like a dopamine hit that you get the same response as like that feel-good response. I think changing boundaries around privacy and sharing of information and how relationships are formed can be impacted quite a lot.
Yeah, I do. I do agree with that. I I think because we live in a digital age and because it's the way most people connect, in lockdown it's been like a lifesaver for a lot of people. But then obviously the negative side of that is people are using social media more to probably talk about their lives or what's going on for them day to day, and that, I don't know, that can have a negative sort of ripple effect. So yeah, it's positive on one hand because it's connecting everybody and connecting people to their friends and their families, but the downside is people are spending more time on social media, and probably absorbing more negativity as well. I think there's more and more pressure on people to look good, to diet, and all these filters that you can use, and airbrushing and all that kind of stuff. I feel like that does give like negative, that's just negative for people to see that because it is unrealistic. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't take into account is when you see the celebrities in their pictures, they've got they'll have stylists, they'll have people editing editing the photos, airbrushing out their wrinkles, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I do agree with you, and I think the media sensationalizes a lot of stuff and doesn't make it real. But then on the flip side, you do have a lot of celebrities that will come out and talk about their own mental health.
Lockdown has increased the time of all ages that they spend on social media, because obviously they don't have the normal hobbies they do, which can impact on mental health of everyone's doing different things. Some people being more productive, and maybe that could feel to others that they're like less significant and they're doing less of their lives than others. Influencers, what we class as influence, do stereotype a certain body image that we're meant to look like, but there are other influences improved during this generation and throughout lockdown and things, with people's mental health becoming more aware of it. But yeah, there's definitely a body image which younger girls and boys look upon and want, which can then sometimes affect their process of how they look and how they want to look.
So I think it comes down to responding with kindness and understanding and with knowledge of mental health. And I think that can be kind of embedded at different levels. So from a government level through the NHS, making access to services available, increasing training opportunities. I think it's been a really important step with the appointment of the UK's mental health ambassador with Dr. Alex George from Love Island. I think it's also really important that, for example, in communities and in institutions like schools, that there is trained staff who are able to respond, and practical steps are taken to make sure that there's access to opportunities for young people to talk about mental health, and that they have access to support as and when they need it. I think for me, like thinking about how we respond, the most important thing is we're listening to the voices and experiences of young people, and starting from there is our point at which we develop our responses and the steps we take. That we should be celebrating some of the progress that's been made, and there's more conversations around mental health, and for example on television and through social media, in terms of training that has been offered and support. I think that we still have some way to go as well.
Do you think like mental health is normalised and enough like awareness has been spread about it?
I think as I've grown up, there's definitely been more awareness spread through social media, but also at college there's help services and options, always like people there to go and talk to. I think definitely needs to be more normalised, as a lot more people I see like are suffering with it and coming out with it. And I think now, especially in terms of genders, men's mental health has become more aware, because it's not as seen as like weak as it used to, and that should continue to change.
I think it would be a lot more helpful if the government probably put more money and more resources into mental health services. I think at the moment, I think we're in a kind of day and age where services and like GPs react to mental health, so people bring it to them and they react to it, whereas if they could have put something in place like earlier on, it might have prevented it, if that makes sense. And I think the government don't put enough money into services, especially to help young people's mental health.
Sometimes what it means to be a young person growing up today would be very different from what it was to be a young person growing up in the 80s. For example, social media wasn't part of my lived experience really, certainly before I was 18, but I think there's a lot of additional stresses that might impact on mental health that impact this generation more so than perhaps it would have done my generation.
Kind of like linked to it, I guess. Like, do you think mental health's got better or worse over the years, or like just not necessarily better, but it's been more talked about?
I think, like I said before, it's been more talked about, meaning more people are opening up and realising they do have mental health issues. They're not as belittled as they used to be.
Standardisation of beauty and I think what impacts like in terms of how we define beauty, how you define your own sense of self, your identity and your own worth. I would say it does. I think there is research out there, but I think there needs to be working with young people to find out that impact that has on them personally, if that makes sense.
I think it's far more positive, because years ago people just wouldn't talk about feelings, people wouldn't talk about mental health, people would see people with poor mental health as being a bit of being abnormal, really. I think what's happened now is that it has become more normalised, and I think that's positive because there isn't as much stigma attached to it. People are prepared to be more supportive now because they know more about it. So it's an education thing, really.